First Contact's Aftermath. The emergency klaxons aboard Space Station Zenith 7 pierced through the usual hum of machinery, their urgent wailing drawing curious glances from both human and alien crew members. Engineer James Harrison barely registered the noise as he focused on the injured Vexillian diplomat, sprawled across the medical bay floor, dark purple blood seeping through his translucent exoskeleton. "I told you, I just need to stop the bleeding," James insisted, pressing his hands against Ambassador Zyrath's wound. The alien's crystalline body structure had shattered near what passed for a thorax, the result of a catastrophic gravitational stabilizer malfunction in the diplomatic quarter. Chief Medical Officer Tulara, a towering Andorian with iridescent scales, hovered nearby with a cluster of medical scanners. "Human Harrison, please step away. Vexillian physiology is extremely delicate. The wrong pressure could shatter their entire crystalline matrix." But James couldn't step away. Not when he'd been the one working on the stabilizer. Not when its failure had happened on his watch. "Look, I've studied their biological specs. If we don't seal this breach now..." His words cut off as something extraordinary happened. Where his hands met Ambassador Zyrath's wounded exoskeleton, a faint golden glow began to emerge. The purple blood slowed its flow, and before their eyes, tiny crystalline structures began to form, bridging the gaps in the ambassador's shattered form. Tulara's medical scanners went wild. "Impossible," she whispered, all four of her eyes widening. "The ambassador's matrix, it's regenerating." James felt a tingling sensation where his skin contacted the alien's crystalline surface. He started to pull away, but Ambassador Zyrath's spindly appendage grabbed his wrist. "Please," the diplomat's translator crackled. "Don't stop." The medical bay erupted into controlled chaos. Alien medical staff of various species crowded around, their instruments whirring and beeping as they documented the unprecedented event. James remained still, watching in fascination as the ambassador's wounds continued to heal wherever his hands made contact. Station Commander Raxon burst into the medical bay, his metallic exoskeleton reflecting the emergency lights. "Report." Tulara's voice trembled with excitement. "Commander, we're witnessing something unprecedented. Human Harrison's touch appears to be catalyzing crystalline regeneration in the ambassador's matrix. It's as if human biochemistry contains properties that can stabilize and repair Vexillian cellular structures." James felt dozens of alien eyes studying him with newfound interest. He'd spent the last year on Zenith 7 as just another human engineer, occasionally drawing curious glances from species who weren't used to working with Earth's relatively new members of the Galactic Alliance. Now, he felt like a specimen under a microscope. "It burns a little," he admitted, noticing the tingling in his palms had intensified. "But I think it's working." Commander Raxon approached cautiously, his sensor arrays extending to analyze the situation. "Ambassador Zyrath, are you stable?" The Vexillian's translator crackled again, stronger this time. "Yes. The pain, it's subsiding. This human's touch, it's like nothing in our medical records." Tulara's scanners continued their analysis. "Commander, preliminary readings suggest human Harrison's blood contains compounds that, when exposed to Vexillian biology, catalyze their natural crystalline repair mechanisms. It's not just stopping the bleeding. It's actively accelerating their healing process." James finally felt Ambassador Zyrath release his wrist. The glowing had subsided, leaving behind fully repaired crystalline structures where devastating damage had been mere minutes before. He flexed his hands, noting the slight redness but feeling no real pain. "I don't understand," he said, looking at his palms. "I'm just a regular human. There's nothing special about me." Commander Raxon's mechanical voice carried a note of what might have been awe. "Perhaps that's precisely what makes this remarkable, Human Harrison. We've had diplomatic relations with Earth for less than a decade. How many other surprises does your species harbor?" The medical bay's doors hissed open again as Dr. Kirin, the station's xenobiologist, hurried in. The Centaurian's tentacles were already reaching for sample collection equipment. "Commander, we need to begin analysis immediately. If human biochemistry can affect Vexillian cellular structures this way, the implications for interspecies medicine are staggering." James found himself surrounded by medical staff, each eager to draw blood samples and run tests. Ambassador Zireth had risen to his full height, his newly repaired crystalline form catching the light. "The Vexillian Consortium will be very interested in this development," the diplomat stated. "Very interested indeed." Commander Raxon raised a metallic appendage for silence. "Before we proceed with any testing or diplomatic overtures, we need to understand exactly what happened here. Human Harrison, are you willing to cooperate with our medical staff? This could be crucial for interspecies relations." James looked at his hands again, then at the crowd of alien faces watching him expectantly. He'd joined the Zenith 7 crew hoping to learn about alien engineering techniques. Instead, he might have stumbled upon something that could change relations between humans and aliens forever. "Of course, Commander," he replied. "Whatever helps. But maybe we could start with something simpler than saving lives. I've got a repair schedule to keep after all." The price of healing. 2 weeks after the incident with Ambassador Zireth, James Harrison found himself staring through the reinforced glass of Zenith 7's main conference room. The space beyond showed Earth floating like a blue marble against the star-speckled void. He wished he could be back there, fixing engines or calibrating gravity plates, anything but being the center of an interstellar diplomatic crisis. "The Regellian Confederation offers 50,000 credits per blood sample," announced Representative Voss, her bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with barely contained excitement, "along with exclusive rights to study human biological compatibility with crystalline-based life forms." "Unacceptable," rumbled Ambassador Zireth, his newly healed crystalline form catching the light. "The Vexillian Consortium has first claim. Without Engineer Harrison's intervention, I would have shattered beyond repair." James suppressed a sigh as he watched 12 different alien species argue over his blood. Dr. Tulera stood beside him, her scaled hand resting protectively on his shoulder. The Andorian chief medical officer had become something of an ally over the past weeks, helping shield him from the more aggressive attempts to study his biology. "If I may," Tulera's voice cut through the rising argument, "our preliminary studies suggest the healing factor isn't unique to Engineer Harrison. It appears to be a common trait among humans, though its effectiveness varies by individual." The conference room erupted into chaos. James watched as holographic displays flickered to life, showing the results of the careful experiments they'd conducted. His blood cells, glowing with that same golden light they'd witnessed during the ambassador's healing, interacting with various alien tissue samples. Commander Raxon's metallic form gleamed as he raised his appendages for silence. "This changes the scope of our discussion considerably. We're no longer talking about a single human's unique ability, but potentially a species-wide trait that could revolutionize interstellar medicine. Which is precisely why the Stellar Medical Coalition should have primary access," declared Dr. Nix, a floating gas-based being whose containment suit sparkled with neural activity. "This discovery belongs to all spacefaring races." James cleared his throat, drawing all eyes toward him. "Don't I get a say in this?" The aliens fell silent, some looking almost embarrassed, or at least their species' equivalent of embarrassment. Commander Raxon gestured for him to continue. "Look," James began, running a hand through his dark hair. "I'm an engineer. I fix things when they break. What happened with Ambassador Zireth was instinct. I saw someone hurt and tried to help. But from what Dr. Tulera's research shows, human blood doesn't just heal crystalline life forms. It can stabilize neural patterns in gaseous beings, reinforce bacterial colonies in silicon-based life, even speed up photosynthesis in plantoid species." He stood, walking to the central display where his cellular structure rotated in holographic detail. "We humans didn't know we could do any of this. Back on Earth, we're just another species trying to survive. But out here..." He gestured to the stars beyond the window. Maybe we're something more. Not better, just different. In a way that could help. Ambassador Zyref's crystalline form hummed thoughtfully. What are you suggesting, Human Harrison? A cooperative program, James replied, feeling more confident. Not exclusive rights to any one species or confederation. We set up a joint research initiative here on Zenith 7. Humans who volunteer to participate, working with medical teams from all member species. We learn together. We share the benefits together. The room buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages. Commander Raxon's sensor arrays whirred as he processed the suggestion. An elegant solution, but Earth's government may have other ideas. They've been remarkably quiet on this matter so far. As if on cue, the conference room's main screen flared to life, displaying the stern face of Admiral Helena Walsh of the Earth Defense Force. Actually, Commander, we've been listening with great interest. James straightened instinctively. He hadn't expected Earth's military to get involved so quickly. Engineer Harrison's suggestion aligns with Earth's interests, Admiral Walsh continued. But we have conditions. Any research program must be conducted under joint oversight, with human medical staff present at all times, and participation must be strictly voluntary. Representative Voss's tendrils dimmed slightly. The credits we offered are appreciated but unnecessary, Admiral Walsh cut in. This isn't about profit. It's about building trust and understanding between species. Engineer Harrison's discovery has shown us that humans may have more to offer the galactic community than we realized. We intend to honor that responsibility. James felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd been worried Earth might try to weaponize this discovery, turn it into another tool for interstellar politics. Instead, they were choosing cooperation. But as he looked around the room at the alien faces, some hopeful, others calculating, he caught a glimpse of something in Dr. Nix's neural patterns, a flicker of something. Concern, fear. Before he could focus on it, the pattern vanished. Then we are agreed, Commander Raxon asked, his mechanical voice carrying across the room. We establish a joint research initiative, with all participating species sharing both the work and the benefits. The vote was unanimous, though James noticed some representatives seemed less enthusiastic than others. As the meeting adjourned, Dr. Tilera pulled him aside. You should be proud, she said, her scales shifting colors in what he learned to recognize as approval. You've handled this with remarkable wisdom for such a young species. James watched the aliens file out, each already speaking into their communication devices, no doubt reporting back to their governments. I just hope we're ready for what comes next. Something tells me this is just the beginning. He couldn't have known how right he was, or that at that very moment, in the darker corners of Zenith 7, others were already making plans of their own. Plans that would put his newfound diplomatic success to the ultimate test. Hidden agendas. The research lab on level 6 of Zenith 7 had become James Harrison's second home over the past month. He sat on the medical observation bed, watching as Dr. Tilera compared readings from 3 different bioscanners. Behind the reinforced partition, representatives from 6 different species observed with intense interest. Something's wrong, James said quietly, so only Tilera could hear. The last 3 accidents on the station. They weren't accidents at all, were they? Tilera's scales rippled with concern as she adjusted her scanner. No, she whispered back. They weren't. First, it had been a mysterious malfunction in the Regellian Quarter's atmospheric processors. Then a sudden power surge in the Centaurian botanical labs. Finally, yesterday's incident, a complete failure of the quantum stabilizers in the Vexillian Crystal Garden. Each time, the victims had been rushed to Medical Bay. Each time, human blood samples had been used to treat them. And each time, the accidents had occurred just as their supply of samples was running low. Someone's engineering emergencies, James continued, his voice hardening. Creating situations where alien lives are at risk, knowing we'll have to help them. Precisely. Tilera set down her scanner and pretended to adjust James's monitoring equipment. Commander Raxon has launched a quiet investigation, but whoever is behind this is covering their tracks well. The observation windows suddenly darkened, giving them a moment of privacy from the watching aliens. Tulera quickly pressed a data chip into James's hand. "Security footage from the Crystal Garden incident," she explained. "Watch it when you're alone. There's something strange about the power signature just before the stabilizers failed." Before James could respond, the window cleared again. Dr. Nix floated into the lab, their containment suit glowing with complex neural patterns. "Fascinating readings today," Nix announced, their translator making the words sound almost musical. "The interaction between human platelets and crystalline matrices continues to exceed all projected models." James forced a smile, slipping the chip into his pocket. Glad to be helping advance science. Indeed, Nix's neural patterns shifted in a way James had never seen before. "Though I wonder, have you experienced any unusual symptoms lately?" "Fatigue, increased sensitivity to electromagnetic fields." "Nothing out of the ordinary," James replied carefully. "Why do you ask?" "Mere scientific curiosity." Nix's containment suit hummed as they moved closer. "Though if you do notice anything unusual, please report it immediately. We wouldn't want any unfortunate incidents." Later that night, in his quarters, James reviewed the security footage. He had to watch it 3 times before he spotted it. A millisecond flicker in the power grid, but with a signature that matched Stellar Medical Coalition technology. The same coalition Dr. Nix represented. His comm unit chimed. "Harrison here. Engineer Harrison." Commander Raxon's mechanical voice was pitched low. "We need you in the auxiliary control room. Immediately. Use access tunnel Gamma 7. Tell no one." James found Commander Raxon waiting with Ambassador Zareth and Dr. Tilura. The ambassador's crystalline form was dimmed, a sign of grave concern among his species. "We've discovered something disturbing," Raxon began without preamble. He activated a holographic display showing molecular structures James recognized from his own blood samples. "These were taken last week." Another image appeared, and these were from yesterday. James studied the differences. "They're degrading?" "Not exactly," Tilera explained. "They're being modified. Someone has been introducing synthetic compounds into our sample storage units. Compounds designed to enhance the healing properties of human blood, but with significant side effects." "Side effects?" Ambassador Zareth's translator crackled. "Addiction. Dependency. The enhanced samples create a temporary healing effect far stronger than natural human blood, but the recipient's body becomes dependent on repeated treatments." The implications hit James like a physical blow. "They're trying to turn our blood into a drug, create a market of dependent users." "Precisely," Raxon confirmed. "And our investigation suggests this plot extends far beyond Zenith 7. We've detected similar molecular signatures in samples being prepared for shipment to at least 12 different worlds." James thought of Dr. Nix's strange behavior, the suspicious accidents, the carefully engineered emergencies, the Stellar Medical Coalition. "Some elements within it, yes," Tilera said, "but we suspect they're working with others. The technology signatures we've detected come from multiple sources. We need your help, Human Harrison," Ambassador Zareth said. "But what we're asking is dangerous. Those behind this conspiracy will not hesitate to eliminate threats to their operation." James looked at the molecular diagrams floating before them, thought of the aliens who had been injured in the staged accidents, remembered Dr. Nix's veiled threat. "What's the plan?" Commander Raxon's metallic form seemed to straighten. "We're going to set a trap, but it requires you to place yourself in considerable danger. We need to catch them in the act, with evidence that will stand up to scrutiny from every member species of the Alliance." "They're already watching me," James pointed out. "How do we avoid tipping them off?" Tilera's scales shifted to a deep blue of determination. "By giving them exactly what they want. An emergency so perfect, so irresistible, they won't be able to resist showing their hand. As they outlined the details of their plan, James felt a mix of fear and resolve. He had come to Zenith 7 to learn about alien engineering. Now he was about to help expose a conspiracy that threatened the foundation of human-alien relations. One more thing, Raxon added. We've detected unusual communications from within Earth's diplomatic corps. We have to consider the possibility that humans are involved in this plot as well. James nodded grimly. Of course there were. Where there was profit to be made, there were always humans willing to set aside ethics. But there were also humans like him, willing to stand against them. When do we start? The answer came in the form of a station-wide alert. A catastrophic failure in the main reactor core was imminent. The trap was about to be sprung, and James could only hope they had planned for every contingency. They hadn't. Breaking point. Red emergency lights bathed Zenith 7's corridors in an ominous glow as James Harrison raced toward the main reactor core. The station's AI blared warnings about critical system failures, but he knew the truth. This emergency was engineered, a carefully crafted trap. What he didn't know was whether they were still the ones setting it. Multiple containment breaches detected. Commander Raxon's voice crackled through his earpiece. But the power signatures, they're not matching our planned simulation. James skidded to a halt at an intersection, checking the diagnostic panel. Someone's hijacked our fake emergency with a real one. These readings, the reactor's actually destabilizing. Impossible. Tilera cut in. The fail-safes have been manually overridden. A new voice interrupted. Dr. Nix's musical tones now carried an edge of triumph. Did you really think we wouldn't detect your little trap, Human Harrison? The comm system went dead. James cursed, checking the reactor readings again. The numbers were climbing toward critical levels. This wasn't just about stealing blood samples anymore. If the reactor went critical, it would tear the station apart. Emergency bulkheads began slamming shut throughout the station. Through a nearby viewport, James caught glimpses of escape pods launching. The conspirators were executing their contingency plan, willing to sacrifice the station and thousands of lives to cover their tracks. Harrison, a crystalline form, emerged from a side corridor. Ambassador Zareth, his translucent body pulsing with urgency. The reactor core is sealed. Dr. Nix and their associates have barricaded themselves inside with hostages. How many? 3. A Regelian engineer, a Centaurian botanist, and the ambassador's form dimmed. Dr. Tilera. James felt his blood run cold. Of course they'd taken Tilera. She had all the evidence of their tampering with the blood samples. Who else knows about this? Commander Raxon is coordinating evacuation protocols. Most of the station's leadership has already been moved to secure locations. But the reactor, Zyrath's translator crackled with distortion. We have 18 minutes before critical mass. James pulled up the station schematics on his datapad. The reactor core's main entrance was sealed, but there was another way in, through the maintenance tunnels he'd spent the last year learning like the back of his hand. Ambassador, I need you to get a message to Commander Raxon. Tell him to focus on evacuation, but have security forces ready at these coordinates. He marked several points on the schematic. And I need everything we have on Nix's containment suit specifications. What are you planning? James was already moving toward the nearest maintenance access. Something stupid. The tunnels were cramped, designed for maintenance drones rather than humans. James crawled through them, guided by memory and desperate calculation. The reactor's radiation would be pushing lethal levels now, but his destination wasn't the core itself. He emerged into the environmental control room adjacent to the reactor chamber. Through the observation window, he could see Dr. Nix and 3 other aliens in sealed environmental suits. T. Lara and the other hostages were bound near the reactor's main console, which pulsed with warning lights. Cannot believe you thought you could trap us, Nix was saying, their neural patterns flickering rapidly. We've spent years planning this operation. The revenue from engineered human blood samples would have made us wealthy beyond imagination. Now, we'll simply have to start over elsewhere. Such a waste. James checked the environmental controls, just as he'd hoped. Nix's containment suit was synchronized with the room's atmospheric processors, a necessary precaution for gaseous beings, but also a vulnerability. He began typing commands into the control panel, grateful for all those late nights studying alien life support systems. The changes would be subtle at first, a slight shift in pressure, a minor adjustment to the gas mixture. An alarm blared on Nix's suit. The gaseous being whirled toward the observation window just as James stepped into view. You. Nix's neural patterns flared with rage. How did you? Funny thing about maintenance access, James interrupted, continuing to type. Nobody ever pays attention to the repair crew. Kind of like how nobody questioned why a gaseous being would need regular access to blood sample storage. Nix's containment suit began to pulse with warning lights. Stop. You'll destabilize my molecular cohesion, like you destabilized the reactor. Don't worry. You've got about 3 minutes before your suit's containment fails. Plenty of time to shut down the reactor and surrender. One of Nix's associates raised a weapon. James didn't flinch. Shoot me, and nobody will be left to stop the atmospheric changes. Dr. Nix will dissipate into component gases. Rather painful way to go, I hear. Nix's neural patterns were growing erratic. You're bluffing. You humans value life too highly to sacrifice thousands by letting that reactor blow. You're right. We do value life. All life. James's fingers flew across the controls. 1 minute, Dr. Nix. Want to see how much I'm bluffing? The weapon lowered. Nix's containment suit was now flashing critical warnings. You'll never prove anything, Nix said, their musical voice distorting. Our contacts are already being rounded up, thanks to the evidence Dr. Tilara collected. 30 seconds. The other conspirators backed away from Nix as the gaseous being's containment suit began to vibrate. Neural patterns shifted chaotically as molecular cohesion began to fail. Stop. Stop. I'll do it. I'll shut it down. James watched through the window as Nix floated to the reactor controls. The warning lights began to fade as the shutdown sequence initiated. Security teams burst in through multiple entrances, weapons trained on the conspirators. As Commander Raxon's forces secured the reactor room and freed the hostages, James slumped against the control panel, adrenaline fading. Tilara rushed into the environmental control room and gripped his shoulder with scaled fingers. That was incredibly reckless, she said, but her colors shifted to show pride. How did you know they wouldn't call your bluff? James managed a weak smile. Because they thought like manipulators, seeing everyone as things to be used. They couldn't understand someone willing to risk everything to save others. He looked through the window where Nix and their associates were being led away in restraints. They never really understood humans at all. But as emergency teams swarmed the reactor room and damage control reports began flooding in, James couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Somewhere out there, others were watching, learning from this failure, planning their next move. The question was, would humanity's gift continue to be a source of healing, or would those who sought to exploit it find another way? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. Unity through understanding. 3 days after the reactor incident, James Harrison stood in Zenith 7's Grand Assembly Hall, surrounded by representatives from every member species of the Galactic Alliance. The station's repairs were still ongoing, but this meeting couldn't wait, not with what they'd discovered in Dr. Nix's encrypted files. The conspiracy extends further than we initially believed, Commander Raxon announced, his metallic form projecting holographic evidence into the center of the hall. Cells operating on 17 different worlds. Operations ranging from simple theft of human blood samples to sophisticated genetic manipulation attempts. Ambassador Zyreth's crystalline form pulsed with controlled anger. And the most disturbing discovery, evidence of experiments to replicate human healing properties through artificial means. James watched the reactions ripple through the assembly. Fear, anger, shame, emotions that transcended species barriers. Dr. Tulera stood beside him, her scales a deep purple of concern. The failed experiments caused devastating mutations in test subjects, she reported, bringing up medical scans that made several delegates flinch. They weren't just trying to create a profitable drug. They were attempting to artificially evolve their own species, regardless of the cost in lives. Admiral Walsh's hologram flickered as she joined the discussion from Earth. We've arrested our own conspirators, 3 members of Earth's diplomatic corps, and a senior official in the medical exchange program. They were providing classified human genetic data to the conspiracy. James stepped forward. It was still strange, addressing such an august assembly, but recent events had given him a new kind of authority. We're missing the point, he said. This isn't just about crime or profit. It's about fear. The hall fell silent. James continued. Every species here evolved to survive their homeworld's challenges. Humans adapted to Earth's countless threats by developing robust healing abilities. The Vexillians evolved crystalline forms to withstand their world's intense pressures. The Regellians developed bioluminescence to survive in their deep oceans. He gestured to the medical scans still floating above them. These conspirators weren't just greedy. They were afraid. Afraid that humans had something they didn't. Afraid we might use it as a weapon or a tool for dominance. So they tried to steal it, to level what they saw as an unfair advantage. Ambassador Zireth moved forward, his crystalline form catching the light. What are you suggesting, human Harrison? That we've been thinking about this all wrong. My blood can heal your people because Earth's challenges made humans adaptable. But every species here has gifts that humans lack. The Vexillians' ability to store and process quantum data in their crystalline matrices. The Andorians' extraordinary sensory perception. The Regellians' mastery of bioluminescent technology. Tulera's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. You're proposing a more comprehensive exchange. Exactly. James turned to address the entire assembly. Instead of treating human healing abilities as some precious resource to be hoarded or stolen, let's make it part of a larger collaboration. Every species sharing their unique biological and technological advantages, working together to overcome our individual limitations. Admiral Walsh's hologram nodded slowly. A galactic biology initiative. Not just medical research, but a complete sharing of evolutionary advantages and adaptations. Under strict ethical guidelines, Commander Raxon added, with all experiments and applications requiring unanimous approval from a multi-species oversight committee. The assembly erupted in discussion, but this time the tone was different. Instead of fear and suspicion, there was excitement, possibility, hope. A Regellian delegate raised her luminescent tentacles. The deep-sea pressure adaptation techniques of our people could be combined with human tissue regeneration to create new treatments for crushing injuries. And our crystalline data storage abilities, Ambassador Zirath added, merged with human neural plasticity, could revolutionize brain trauma recovery. One by one, delegates began offering their species' unique abilities to the initiative. Each contribution was met with growing enthusiasm as the possibilities multiplied. James felt Tulera's scaled hand on his shoulder. You've done something remarkable, she said quietly. Turned a potential diplomatic disaster into an opportunity for unprecedented cooperation. We all did, James replied, watching as former adversaries began eagerly discussing research possibilities. Sometimes it just takes a crisis to show us what's possible when we stop fearing our differences and start sharing our strengths. Commander Raxon approached them as the assembly began breaking into smaller discussion groups. The Oversight Committee will need experienced administrators, those who understand both the scientific and ethical implications. His sensor arrays focused on James. Would you consider a position, Engineer Harrison? Or should I say, Director Harrison? James looked around the hall, at aliens who had been strangers a few months ago and were now colleagues, allies, friends. He thought of the maintenance tunnels where he crawled to save the station, the medical bay where his blood had first healed Ambassador Zirith, the countless moments of fear and discovery and wonder that had brought them to this point. On one condition, he said with a smile, I still get to fix things when they break. As laughter rippled through various translator devices, James knew they had turned a corner. The conspiracy had tried to exploit humanity's gifts for profit and power. Instead, they had inadvertently created something far more valuable. A true partnership between species, based not on fear or greed, but on the simple truth that every civilization had something unique to offer. The stars visible through Zenith 7's grand viewport seemed brighter somehow, as if illuminating the path forward. Humanity's healing touch had opened a door, but what lay beyond it would be discovered together, one shared gift at a time. End.